Yeah, I hit the button. Okay, well, half of the day response video, sort of, I guess. Look, I've already done the aphorism 1, 2, 3 video, or whatever it was. Just spelled out the simple logic here. You observe the circumstance. You dissect the problem, which is this suffering thing, this not feeling well thing, this pain, misery, harsh deprivation. So yeah, that's the problem with this little utopia we're existing in. It's the existence of this negative, blah, 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 blah. And really, we're just arguing about under what circumstances is this allowed to be imposed to get what you want or something. And so that's the simple equation. So the problem is there's an ingredient that's toxic and nasty, and is it possible to extract the ingredient short of not making the recipe? Yeah, something like that. Realistically. Yeah, and so he's just goes into these it's just amazing. He complains I call him an idiot, when all he does is spend his whole video, he's got a 30-minute video, the first 15 minutes now are just this incessant accusations, implications of self-contradiction and ignorance, and it seems, it's so just preposterous. You can call somebody ignorant, and yet you can't call them an idiot. Yeah, and he's the one claiming he's logical. That's an insult, by the way. Yeah, satire and such. Just cut me a break. But again, I've spelled out a simple kind of, this is how I observe the world. Explain to me where I've made an error in my judgment of the circumstance. And so then his first, this is how he just plays this circular game, right? Because he says the error is you can't establish the existence of this bad thing. You can't prove suffering is bad. So then you go to the trouble to try to explain why it is fundamentally and intrinsically bad. He plays some more word games, partially concedes the point, perhaps in some sort of evasive manner that he'll contradict himself later on. And so then he can, concede that point, and then he'll raise some other, tangential accusation about subjectivity or to whom, or that's not the subject at issue, or whatever his bullshit is, and you just end up chasing this nonsense where then he'll play your clips saying how, look, he's saying it different ways. The reason why I'm saying suffering sucks I've said suffering sucks for 6 years, whatever. I mean, some of my oldest videos have the term suffering sucks in them, for a long, long time. And the reason why I would ever say it any other way is because you idiots can't figure it out. Why should I have to even re-explain it? Why should I have to explain it? Suffering sucks. That means suffering's bad. That means suffering's a negative. That means blah, blah, blah. I go through this whole, mush. I don't do it because I have some will, or need that I perceive to exist, that I see. Any need for me to have to explain this to sentient beings, that having pain and suffering sucks, and that my pain and suffering isn't any different than anybody else's pain and suffering. Whoa. Yeah, I just didn't think that was something I'd have to explain to adults. No way. And so the fact that I've said it different ways is because you insisted I do that. You said prove it. So that was the effort to attempt to prove it to you. So this is the extent of the duplicity and insidious manipulation of these people. They're not having a fair conversation or argument. It's just a perversion. So anyway, what do I really want to do with this video? I mean, part of me just says like, okay, I'll draw you a picture again. You know, here we put this, here's the circumstance. There's a thing called a problem, and there's a thing called a solution. Okay, well, let's identify the problem. Okay, the problem is there's bad stuff in the world. Yeah, bad happens. You know, and you know, we can't justify having the good if there's too much of this bad. So somehow we have to figure out a way. Can we get rid of the bad? You know, are we required to get rid of it? And if we can't, is there a consequence to that? Does that mean something? That's even a more complicated way to say it than I'd like. I mean, some of this is just so simple, and then some of it's just a hair, like, you know, like grammar school kind of. You know, where you have to get two concepts in your head. You know, like the difference between an actual value, like something being in pain, and the projected value of, you know, I like, I want, you know, cupcakes. You know, that the projections, the ones created by some dependency or need, or even just psychology, like a better example might be, you know, I want our home team to win the big game. You know, that value is just so disconnected from anything, you know, visceral, hard, anything that really needs to exist. It's completely an addictive psychology kind of projected value. Yes, the individual needs it, but the need doesn't have any real necessary root. It doesn't have a core of substance. And the fact that they will be pleased or displeased based on this event is a circumstance not necessary to the function of life. So you could say, if this is part of the problem that you are having in your gameplay, is these you know, some negative created by these circumstances, you might say these are negatives you could get rid of. You know, that you could, you know, tell people to wear plastic spikes instead of metal spikes. You know, for example, you could say easy to solve kind of problem. You're not giving up much. Let's see, what another way to say that. But, you know, it's just a simple kind of concept, the difference between value that exists in something because it's in a condition of value, that is, it's happy or sad, and value that you create by saying, I like stick. Stick means something to me. It pleases me. That's a very different kind of value. So if you put, you know, crying baby next to my happy stick, the crying baby is a real value in the sense that it's really doing value now, where the stick is some kind of projection of value. It may have potential to create value for me, but it's only potential, and the connection of the value isn't, you know, visceral. It isn't dependent. There's nothing structural that demands stick be the solution. Something else could be the solution to my problem. So it's not that. So there's a, you know, you have to use a certain number of words to sort of explain the difference between, you know, a baby and a diamond. You know, diamonds have socially contrived value, where the baby again has an actual welfare state, and the value is fundamental, independent of your perception. It's value creating, in a sense, by being alive and sentient and in existence, where the diamond only has value as an extension of our dependencies or our psychology, or, you know, some extraneous function. Yeah. So, and then you get into this argument. The subtlety of the other argument would be this subtle argument of this consent problem. So if you go back to the problem and solution, an element of the problem isn't so much that you could say, well, the good outweighs the bad. Where there's other people that say that it's not true, and you're just having an argument about who's allowed to override each other's, whether the optimist or the pessimist should win. And then a higher element of that, though, is this argument of consent, is that you have to sort of go to the first cause. Who committed the first crime? You can, technically kill the murderer because the murderer committed the first crime. Rape the rapist, whatever, however you want to metaphor that. Because they commit the first trespass. And so the initiation of the imposition of life is sort of quite by obviously, creation is an initiation. It's the first cause, especially for the human who has the capacity to understand and weigh and decide to make it happen or not happen. And so the issue like consent would come up. And again, I've made the arguments that even if you can't get consent, it doesn't change the fact that not having consent means you have a higher imposition of a higher standard. So without consent, you have to be sure you're not murdering, or you're not raping, or you're not imposing, that you're so in control and incapable of uncorrectable catastrophic error that you can do no real harm. That's part of the obligation. It's just sort of built into the circumstance of solution. Your solution, can't carry with it this huge ethical flaw I'll just ignore the victims. I'll ignore the problem instead of solve the problem. And that's essentially what the counter solution to the problem of suffering is to basically, they're just arguing, I have a right to say, screw you, to the victims. I don't have an obligation to meet the high standards of the aggressiveness of creation. I'm deciding for somebody what they're going to value, and yet they have no obligation to be certain that their perception of value is accurate and that their creation should, by reasonable standards, be grateful, not by some sort of circumstantial standard of, well, most of them are, so it's okay. Most of them are deluded into believing, so therefore, it's okay. So it's almost like arguing, a Christian could argue because most kids come out Christian, therefore it's okay because they're likely to be a Christian. I mean, you can't use that kind of logic because we know that we, speaking in Nietzschean terms, we, the enlightened, know that Christianity is nonsense. There is no God. It's absolute rubbish. And regardless of what people believe, the truth is quite different. And so you may be able to, fantasize about the fact that, well, most people believe life is a fruitful journey. Well, the fact that they believe it doesn't make it true. So you still have to counter the logic of the individual who says, no, wait a minute, it is not what you say it is. And you have no right to assume my judgment to be as poor as the majority judgment. You certainly do not have a right to create a Christian, an imbecile, and you don't have a right to presume you're going to turn me into one and oblige me to walk some silly walk because you're walking it. Because you think your life is purposeful does not give you the right to assume I will believe it's purposeful to walk your walk. And the irony of this is that Hafade is a depressive, suicidal lunatic. And you're just like, what the fuck, man? Why am I having to argue this with a guy who's trying to kill himself? You know, it just can't get any. I mean, life is ludicrous, but I mean, it's really just, yeah. Holy shit. Anyway, I might make another video, might draw the pictures. Probably can't hurt, because he's drawing diagrams of misparaphrase and distortions. I mean, it's just so obnoxious. Like I said, I couldn't have made it simpler. I made the aphorism 1, 2, 3, ABC, something like that. I spelled it out, simple. And I said, where's my flaw in judgment? And he said the flaw in judgment was, you can't prove suffering is bad. So what am I going to say? As I stated before, if you need proof of that, we have nothing to talk about. Absolutely nothing. You know, nothing.